I was serving champagne at a gallery when I saw it. A painting I made when I was 6. Price tag $150,000. Sir, that painting is mine, I said. Impossible. The gallery owner laughed. He called security to kick me out. But he forgot to check the secret message on the back of the canvas. Being invisible was my job. It was also my superpower, honed over 2 decades of necessity. Tonight, I was Cora, the catering staff, wearing the standard uniforms, a crisp white shirt, a black vest that never quite fit my shoulders, and the perpetual, pleasant smile of a person paid to disappear. The money was decent. Certainly better than the retail job I'd quit last year. Though it paid nothing close to the life the people swirling around me took for granted. I worked for Elite Events Catering, and tonight's gilded cage was the Duncan Gallery, a high-end institution celebrating the opening of a new exhibition titled Voices Unheard. The title itself was a mockery to me. I moved through the crowd, tray loaded with champagne flutes, an automaton navigating a sea of expensive perfume and murmured deals. The walls were lined with expensive art, and the air hummed with the self-congratulatory chatter of people buying culture and compassion. To these people, I was furniture. An obstacle to be gracefully moved around. That was fine. Furniture doesn't feel. Furniture doesn't remember. I was good at being furniture. I'd been doing it, metaphorically, since I was 6 years old, the age I entered the foster care system. This collection is extraordinary, Victor. A woman in a dark designer dress took a glass off my tray without meeting my eyes. Thank you, Margot. I've been curating this collection for decades. Victor Duncan, the gallery owner, was a man in his early 60s, silver-haired, impeccably tailored, and smelling strongly of money and old privilege. Each piece tells a story, and the provenance is verified. Each piece comes with documentation of origin: orphanages, group homes, street markets. I've spent years tracking down these works. Lies. I thought automatically, slipping back into the kitchen to refill my tray. It was the general assumption you made about men like Victor. Everything they said was polished until the truth slipped away. I resumed my circuit, offering drinks, picking up empty glasses. The heat in the gallery was suffocating, a mix of bodies, money, and ambition. I rounded a corner near a secluded alcove dedicated to smaller, more intimate pieces, and then I saw it. The tray tilted precariously in my hand, nearly sending a cascade of crystalline glass to the marble floor. I froze. My breathing stopped. It was small, maybe 12 by 16 inches. A simple watercolor and crayon piece on thick paper, set in a massive, heavy, dark wood frame. The image was abstract. Swirls of bright blue for the sky, bursts of yellow for the sun. 2 figures, crude, childlike, were drawn in black crayon. One figure was tall, the other small, their tiny, poorly drawn hands linked. It was the kind of painting a 6-year-old makes, full of pure, unbridled emotion, but lacking any skill. It was hideous and perfect. In the bottom right corner, almost invisible beneath the frame's edge, were 3 letters written in shaky green crayon ang. And in the top left corner, faded but still present, was a date: May 12, 2003. May 12, 2003. My 6th birthday. My vision blurred. The polished brass handle of the tray felt suddenly slippery. My hands started shaking, violently. I had to force myself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way the social worker taught me to control my panic when I was a kid. I made this. I remembered the worn kitchen table in our tiny apartment. The cheap watercolors my mother had bought me from the dollar store. I remembered the scent of the paper, the way the colors ran when I pressed too hard. And I remembered the proud, gap-toothed smile I gave my mother when I showed her. "It's beautiful, baby," she'd whispered, pulling me close. "It's us, right? You and me." "Yeah, Mama," I'd said, clutching the painting to my chest. "Always together." That was the day before they took me away. I stared at the small placard next to the painting. Untitled Mother and Child, Artist Unknown, circa 2003. Found at St. Catherine's Children's Home. $150,000. My painting. My memory. My stolen childhood was being admired by people holding champagne that I, the invisible staff, had served. People were starting to stare at me. The motionless girl blocking the art. I forced my feet to move, walking stiffly to the back hallway, until I found the small, tiled staff bathroom. I locked myself in, sat on the cold toilet lid, and put my head in my hands. Victor Duncan. He was the social worker who showed up the next day, smiling too much. The one who told my mom she wasn't fit. The one who took me. And he had taken the painting. I remembered holding it, crying. "I'll keep this safe for you, sweetheart," he had said, thin lips curving into a fake smile. "You'll get it back." I never saw it again until tonight. 22 years. 22 years in the system. 7 different foster homes. Aged out at 18 with nothing but a garbage bag of old clothes, and a lifetime of being told I was disposable. And now Victor Duncan, the man who set that trajectory, was selling the last piece of my original family for $150,000. I stood, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at the tired, angry woman in the mirror. My invisibility was over. My quiet life was over. He had stolen from me. I was going to prove it, and I was going to destroy him. The cold water of the staff bathroom didn't numb the shock. It just made the anger sharper. I gripped the edges of the sink, feeling 22 years of abandonment and silence converge on this one polished gallery. Victor Duncan had not only torn my life apart, but he was actively, publicly profiting from the wreckage. I was supposed to be the forgotten girl, the invisible woman who served his drinks. I will not be invisible again. I straightened my vest, trying to regain the facade of the obedient caterer. I had to get the tray back to the kitchen, clock out, and disappear for real before my absence was noted. I couldn't afford to be fired yet, not until I had a plan. But my feet, still shaking, didn't head for the kitchen. They led me back to the alcove where my childhood, priced at $150,000, sat under a spotlight. Victor was still there, now talking to a distinguished-looking couple, probably potential buyers. He was leaning in, gesturing toward the watercolor, telling one of his verified provenance stories. He looked the very picture of ethical curation. I walked straight up to the group. I didn't smile. I didn't offer a drink. I was just there. Victor looked at me, mildly annoyed. His eyes didn't hold a hint of recognition. Why would they? To him, I was just a uniform. "Sir," I said. My voice steady, though my stomach was trying to climb into my throat. He turned, putting on the smooth, patronizing expression he reserved for staff or tedious clients. "Yes. This painting." I continued, pointing a gloved hand at the small frame. I drew it when I was 6. The air around them instantly solidified. The couple, a woman wearing an aggressive amount of gold jewelry, and her silent male companion, blinked at me. Victor's face remained infuriatingly calm, but a flicker, a tiny, lightning, fast contraction, passed through his eyes. Was it recognition? Fear? Or just the annoyance of an expensive moment being interrupted by the help? "Excuse me," Victor said smoothly, his tone low and dangerous. "This painting is mine," I repeated, louder this time. The anger was rising now, hot and unstoppable. It was the righteous anger of the child he had betrayed. "I made it on May 12, 2003. It was my 6th birthday. I made it for my mother. Her name was Angela. That's why I wrote Ang in the corner." Victor smiled, a slow, utterly chilling movement that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss," he said, injecting extreme patience into the single syllable, "I think you are confused. Perhaps you made a similar painting as a child. But this piece has been authenticated." "By who?" "You," I challenged. "By professionals," he snapped, the patience instantly gone. He stepped forward, putting his body between me and the painting, trying to physically dismiss me. "Now, if you'll excuse me, you're disrupting the event. I'll need to ask you to leave." The nearby chatter had quieted. Other guests were turning, drawn by the high drama of a staff member daring to accuse the host. My heart pounded a rapid, frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I am not leaving," I said, my voice shaking with the effort of holding my ground. "That is my painting. You took it from me. You were the social worker who lied to my mother and promised me you'd keep it safe." Victor didn't waste any more words on me. He turned slightly, raising his hand toward a large, well-built man standing near the entrance. "Security. Escort this woman out, please." The security guard, a man whose sheer size was intimidating, was at my side in seconds. He took my arm firmly, his grip impersonal but inescapable. Wait, I hadn't proven anything. I was just the hysterical caterer. He was the respected gallery owner. As the guard pulled me away, I looked back at Victor. He was already turning away, dismissing me from his mind as easily as he dismissed my childhood. "I'll prove it," I said, loud enough for the gathering cluster of guests to hear. "I'll prove that painting is mine. And I'll prove you stole it." He didn't acknowledge me. The heavy door swung closed behind me, shutting out the murmur of the offended elite. I sat on the cold stone curb outside, still wearing my ridiculous black vest, the taste of metallic fury sharp on my tongue. A minute later, Tony, my manager, rushed out. He was short, sweaty, and stressed. "Cora, what the hell happened?" he whispered fiercely, glancing nervously back at the gallery doors. I recounted the bare facts, keeping the worst of the emotional damage hidden. I saw a painting I made when I was a kid being sold for $150,000. I confronted the owner. He had me kicked out. Tony sighed, running a hand over his slicked back hair. "You know you can't do that. You can't confront clients. We work high-end events, Cora. Discretion is literally our business model." He stole from me, Tony. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet," I admitted, my eyes fixed on the gallery doors. "But I will." Tony looked miserable. "Well, until you do, you're off the schedule. I can't have you causing scenes." "I'm sorry, Cora. Call me when you sort this out." He left me there, alone and jobless. The streetlights glared, turning the curb into an interrogation room. I was furious, yes, but beneath the fury was a bedrock of determination. Victor Duncan had not only robbed me 22 years ago, but he had just proven that he still saw me as worthless, as disposable. He was a thief, a liar, and a manipulator who had preyed on vulnerable children. And I, the invisible girl, was going to take everything from him. Jobless and fueled by rage, Cora went straight to the library the next morning to turn her memory into verifiable fact. I couldn't afford a lawyer, but I could certainly afford the price of public computer time. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing the name that had haunted the edges of my nightmares for decades. Victor Duncan, social worker. The results were immediate and sickeningly clear. He was licensed in New York State from 1985 through 2005, working for State Child Protective Services. Then, like a chameleon shedding a dull skin, he left social work in 2005 and opened the Duncan Gallery, specializing exclusively in outsider art. Convenient. I found articles detailing his rise. Duncan Gallery features rare collection of children's art. Victor Duncan's eye for undiscovered talent. The headlines were grotesque in their irony. He wasn't preserving the voices of forgotten artists, he was exploiting the pain of stolen children. I kept digging, building a timeline. He was my caseworker when I was 6 in 2003. The painting was dated 2003. He acquired the piece, according to his own placard, at St. Catherine's Children's Home, which was where I was briefly placed after my removal. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together. But the picture they formed wasn't legal proof of theft. It was just a pattern of exploitation. How do you prove a memory? The original painting was sealed away in his gallery, protected by expensive framing and even more expensive lawyers. I had no photographs of myself with it. My mother and I were too poor for cameras back then. We barely had money for food, let alone sentimental snapshots. All I had was the absolute certainty of my memory, the ache in my chest that told me I had made it. But then I remembered a small, secret detail. Something I had done, only because my mother had praised the crude letters. I had already scratched onto the front. If that painting was really mine, the one I had made, it had more than just the 3 letters on the corner. On the back of the paper, hidden beneath the frame and the paper backing, I had written a slightly longer message. I wanted her to see it when she hung it up. I knew what it said. The childish writing of a 6-year-old learning to spell F for mama. Love, Aaron. I had even signed the wrong name, forgetting the O in my own name, Cora, and writing Aaron instead, because it was easier to sound out. This also explained why the name Aaron appeared on the front of the painting alongside Ang, in the corner. It was a detail only I could know. A detail Victor Duncan would have dismissed if he had ever bothered to check. That message was my proof. I just needed to see the back of the painting. I needed to get back into the gallery, past Victor, and into a private viewing room. 2 days later, sitting at my chipped kitchen table in my tiny apartment, I put the plan into action. I practiced a new voice, a breathy, high-pitched tone that spoke of endless wealth and crushing boredom. I called the Duncan Gallery. A receptionist answered, chipper and polite. I asked to speak to Victor Duncan about the outsider art collection. May I ask what this is regarding? She asked. I'm interested in purchasing a piece from the Outsider art collection. I drawled, trying to sound like I'd just stepped off a yacht. The mother and child watercolor. It's hauntingly simple, isn't it? Oh, wonderful. The receptionist gushed. Let me connect you to Mr. Duncan. A short, nerve-shredding pause followed. Then, the voice that had sealed my fate 22 years ago came on the line. This is Victor Duncan. Mr. Duncan, I purred, using my adopted persona. My name is Claire Pine. I had invented the last name moments before. Pulling it from the Pine air freshener, clipped to my roommate's car vent. I'm interested in the watercolor piece. The one with the mother and child. I'd like to examine it before making an offer. His tone warmed instantly, the kind of warmth reserved only for money. Of course. Are you a collector, Miss Pine? My family is. I lied smoothly. I'm new to this. But I have a budget of up to $200,000 for the right piece. That number had the desired effect. The man who had dismissed me as a piece of furniture was now hanging on my every word. Excellent. He practically purred. When would you like to come in? Tomorrow, I said, keeping the breathy indifference in my voice. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I prefer a private viewing, of course. Perfect. I'll have the piece ready for viewing in the West Salon. It will be a pleasure to meet you, Miss Pine. I hung up, leaning my head back against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. Tomorrow. I had bought myself 20 minutes alone with Victor and the painting. I had to find an outfit, buy some accessories, and perfect the persona of a wealthy, clueless buyer. I had to become the very thing I despised. But I was going to see the back of that paper. And I was going to prove that Victor Duncan was nothing but a thief. The invisibility had been shed. Now it was time to become the actress. The next day, dressed in borrowed clothes that cost more than her month's rent, Cora stood outside Duncan Gallery, ready to play the role of Claire Pine. I wore a structured navy blazer, tailored black slacks, and a pair of large, tortoiseshell glasses that framed my face in a way that screamed discerning and wealthy. The new persona was a shield, a protective layer against the vulnerability I knew I was about to face. I walked in precisely at 2 o'clock. The receptionist, a young woman with hair the color of polished mahogany, smiled politely. May I help you? I have an appointment with Mr. Duncan. 2 p.m., Claire Pine, I said, pitching my voice to the required degree of soft entitlement. Of course, Miss Pine. 1 moment. I waited, my heart doing a nervous, frantic dance against my ribs. Seconds later, Victor Duncan emerged. He was dressed in a soft gray suit that must have cost 5 figures. He approached me with a professional, practiced warmth. He looked at me, scanning my face, and for one terrifying moment, I thought he might recognize the caterer he'd thrown out 2 nights ago. But the glasses and the expensive clothes had done their job. I was elevated in his eyes, rendered safe and profitable. Ms. Pine. A pleasure to meet you, he said, extending a hand. I shook it, trying to ignore the deep, visceral revulsion. Thank you for seeing me, I replied, pulling my hand back quickly. Of course. You're interested in the mother and child piece. Please, follow me. He led me to a private viewing room in the back, a small space lit by soft, focused track lighting. In the center sat a minimalist easel, and on the easel, Under a beam of soft white light was my painting. My chest tightened. A familiar vise of grief and adrenaline. Up close, the childish colors looked even more poignant. The simple strokes, the crude, loving figures. I kept my face utterly neutral, observing the work with the detached interest of a buyer. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Victor murmured, basking in the glow of his supposed aesthetic mastery. "There's something truly haunting about it. The simplicity, the raw emotion. It's truly a remarkable piece of outsider art." "Remarkable, indeed," I agreed, walking closer. "The provenance states it was found at St. Catherine's, yes. Yes. 2003. A staff member was cleaning out old storage, found several pieces by children. And this one stood out. We acquired it directly from the home." He paused, giving me a moment to admire the lie. I kept my gaze fixed on the painting, my internal narrative screaming layer. "May I?" I gestured toward the frame. "Please," he said. I moved closer, pretending to study the yellow swirls and the faint, green ang in the corner. Then, I delivered the planned blow. Keeping my voice light and professional. "May I see the back?" Victor hesitated. Just a slight stillness, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "The back, yes," I insisted, injecting a note of demanding eccentricity into my voice. "I like to see the full piece. Sometimes there are marks, signatures, or even faint pencil notations that add to the story. For an investment of this size, I need the complete picture, Mr. Duncan, of course." He recovered quickly. "However, it's been professionally framed, you see. To preserve it." He carefully lifted the painting off the easel and turned it around. The back of the wooden frame was completely sealed with a layer of brown paper backing, covering the original watercolor paper. The backing protects the original paper from dust and atmospheric damage. "I understand," I said, putting a note of stubbornness into my voice. "But I'd like to see beneath it before I make an offer. That backing could hide anything. I'm serious about purchasing. But I need to see everything first." He studied me, calculating the risk. The price tag, $200,000, was clearly heavy leverage. His greed won. "Very well, Ms. Pine. Your interest is compelling." He sighed dramatically, as if agreeing to my demand was an unbearable inconvenience. "Let me get my tools. I'll have to remove the backing, but I assure you, I will seal it perfectly." Victor left the room. I stood there alone, breathing hard. My body tense and ready. This was it. If the inscription was still there, my identity would be proven. If he remembered the message, he might shred the paper. The wait was agonizing. He returned with a small toolkit. He set the painting face down on the table, the sealed backing facing up. Carefully, he began working, removing the tiny nails that secured the brown paper. I watched, silent, barely breathing, a camera already recording discreetly on my phone, resting on a nearby armchair. Victor peeled back the brown paper. The back of the original watercolor paper, faded and yellowed with age, was exposed. And there it was. Visible in the center, in childish, unmistakable green crayon. "For Mama. Love, Aaron." Victor went completely still. His hand stopped hovering over the paper. "What does that say?" I asked, my voice no longer the breathless Claire Pine, but sharp, clear, and laced with absolute triumph. He didn't answer. "It says, 'For Mama, love Aaron,'" I stated. "Doesn't it?" Victor looked up slowly, his eyes finally focusing on me. truly seeing me this time. The realization hit him. Not the recognition of my face, but the terrifying recognition of my words, my proof, my power. You, he whispered. You're the girl from the opening, the caterer. I took a deliberate step closer to the table, staring down at the inscription. My name is Cora, Victor. Cora Perry. And you took me from my mother 22 years ago. You took this painting from me, and promised to keep it safe. And now you're selling it for $150,000. That's not, he stammered, standing up quickly, knocking his chair slightly. This isn't. My name is on the back, love, Aaron. That's me. This is my painting. You can't prove that. I just did, I said, picking up my phone and snapping 3 quick, clear photos of the inscription before he could move. Lots of children are named Aaron, yes. But May 12, 2003, was my 6th birthday. I made this for my mother, Angela Perry. You came to our apartment the next day. You said you'd keep the painting safe. You lied. You stole it. His face was pale, his veneer completely shattered. You need to leave. I'm calling the police. Good. I shot back, meeting his frightened gaze with my own cold fury. Call them. I'll show them the back of the painting, my name, my mother's name, the date, and then I'll tell them how you were my social worker. You stole this from a 6-year-old Victor. You're a thief. Security! He roared. The same large guard from the opening appeared instantly. He grabbed my arm, but I held my phone tight. I have proof now, Victor, I said, loud and clear, letting him see the fierce joy of my victory. And I'm going to expose you. He just watched as I was escorted out. But I saw it in his eyes, not just anger, but genuine, freezing terror. Exiting the gallery, Cora knew the evidence was strong. But she couldn't fight Victor's money and power alone. She needed a voice as loud as his silence was deep. I walked the 10 blocks back to my apartment, still dressed in the expensive, borrowed blazer that now felt like a costume for a war I'd just started. Victor had proof of his supposed ethical acquisition, forged documents, and a lifetime of reputation. All I had was a blurry photograph on my phone, and a testimony that could easily be dismissed as the desperate raving of a fired caterer. I needed someone who had the platform and the courage to take down a respected figure in the art world. I needed a professional who specialized in the kind of fraud Victor was committing. Back in my tiny, safe apartment, I settled onto my worn sofa and opened my laptop. I Googled "Art Theft Investigative Journalist." The search results were filled with names, but one stood out: Jodi Coleman. Her name was attached to articles exposing forged antiques, stolen historical items, and, most recently, a massive gallery cover up involving provenance switching. Her profile photo showed a sharp, featured woman in her early 40s with an unyielding gaze. I read a quote attributed to her. "There's no statute of limitations on the truth, only on courage." That was the woman I needed. I found her email address. I stared at the blank screen for a long time, trying to decide how to pitch a story that sounded less like a delusion and more like an indictment. Finally, I typed Miss Coleman. My name is Cora Perry. I have evidence that Victor Duncan, owner of Duncan Gallery, has been stealing and selling artwork created by children in foster care. I can prove one of the pieces currently for sale is mine. I was his victim 22 years ago, when he was my social worker. I have photographic proof of an inscription on the back of the painting with my name. I'd like to speak with you. I hit send, then immediately felt sick. I had just pinned my entire future, my fragile sense of justice, on a single, cold email to a stranger. 3 agonizing days passed. I checked my email every 30 minutes, jumping at every notification. I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a raw, shaky fear. What if she ignored it? What if she thought I was crazy? Then, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Cora Perry, a voice asked. It was low, professional, and slightly wary. Yes. This is Jody Coleman. I got your email. Tell me everything. I took a deep breath. I didn't hide anything. I started at the beginning. My mother. The dollar store watercolors. The promise Victor made. The 22 years in the system. And finally, finding the painting at the gallery, confronting him, and forcing him to show the back. Jody listened without interruption. The silence on the other end felt heavy, intelligent. Do you have the photos? She finally asked. Yes. Of the front and the back, with my name, Aaron, and the date, May 12, 2003, clearly visible. Send them to me now. I sent the images and waited, the phone still pressed to my ear. Another pause. A long, silent minute stretched between us. Cora, Jody said, her voice now infused with a sudden, electrifying intensity. I've been investigating Victor Duncan for 2 years. I've always suspected he acquired works unethically, exploiting the very stories he sells for outrageous prices, but I could never prove the direct theft from the source. This is the proof I needed. My throat was suddenly tight. So, you believe me? I do. And I think you're not the only one. If he did this to you, a child he personally removed, he did it to others. I think there are other children whose art he stole. We need to find them. How? Records, Jody explained, her voice turning completely tactical. I'll request sales documentation of every piece of outsider art he sold over the last 2 decades. I'll cross-reference those dates and locations with foster care systems and public records. We need to find those kids, now adults, and ask if they recognize their work. Will that work? I asked, my hope cautious. It might. But it requires speed, and it requires your help. Are you willing to go public with this? He has money, lawyers, and a reputation. He will fight back, hard. I looked at the walls of my small, rented apartment, a place that felt temporary and fragile. I thought of my mother, gone too soon, thinking I was gone forever. I thought of every other kid who had their small piece of value taken. I don't care, I said. He stole from me. From kids who had nothing. He needs to be stopped. Okay. Jody confirmed. Let's do this. But this is no longer just about your painting. We're building a class action case against the man who monetized the system that failed you. Jody worked fast. Within 2 weeks, leveraging her contacts and utilizing public records from state grants and gallery audits, she managed to gain access to sales records from Duncan Gallery. She found over 200 pieces of outsider art sold in the past 20 years. She found patterns. Many pieces were dated between 2000 and 2005, the precise period when Victor was an active social worker. They were often labeled found at children's homes or acquired from estate sales of former foster children. Jody started making calls. She found Gary Thomas. Jody arranged a meeting for us at a neutral coffee shop. Gary was 35, his face lined with quiet fatigue. But his eyes held a familiar, determined spark. "I saw my painting on Duncan's website 3 years ago," Gary told us, stirring his coffee slowly. "It was a drawing I made when I was 8 of my dog, Buster. He died right before I went into foster care. I drew him to remember him." "Victor took it?" I asked, a fresh wave of sick recognition washing over me. "Yeah. Said he'd preserve it for me. I never saw it again, until I found it online being sold for $80,000. "Did you confront him?" "I tried. He denied it was mine. Said lots of kids draw dogs. I didn't have proof, so I gave up." Gary looked at me. "I didn't have the stomach for the fight." "We have proof now," Jody interjected. "Cora's painting has her name on the back. We have the timeline. If we all come forward together, his lies fall apart." Gary looked at the table, then lifted his eyes. They were hard and clear. "I'm in. I'm tired of people like him taking from us. We were kids. We had nothing. And he stole the one thing we did have. Our memories." I reached across the table and shook his hand. His grip was firm. For the first time since seeing my painting, I didn't feel completely alone. We were the invisible made visible, a small, quiet army of forgotten children, finally fighting back. 2 weeks after their meeting, the small alliance Cora and Jody forged detonated across the art world in an article titled, "Stolen Childhoods: How One Gallery Owner Profited from Foster Children's Art." Jody Coleman was brilliant. She hadn't just published a personal accusation. She had presented an airtight case. The article was a masterpiece of journalism, weaving together Victor Duncan's career timeline, the sales data, the clear pattern of art dating back to the years he worked as a social worker, and the 5 testimonies, including mine and Gary's. She included the photo of the back of my painting, showing the inscription for Mama, Love, Aaron, juxtaposed against Victor's carefully curated provenance tag claiming, "Artist, unknown." The reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. The article went viral, tearing through the art community like wildfire. Duncan Gallery was instantly flooded with calls. Protests sprang up outside his immaculate front doors. Buyers who had paid exorbitant sums for ethically acquired outsider art demanded refunds and proof of ownership. Victor released a predictable, furious statement, claiming the allegations were false, slanderous, and motivated by disgruntled former employees and opportunists. He threatened lawsuits. But the evidence, anchored by 5 victims with matching stories and 2 decades of damning public records, was overwhelming. His elegant defenses crumbled under the weight of the facts. For me, the public exposure was terrifying. I was no longer the invisible server. I was the face of a massive public scandal. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters tried to track me down, looking for quotes and deeper details. I spent those days holed up in my apartment, relying entirely on Jody to handle the media storm. The intensity of the spotlight was a new kind of trauma, a forced visibility after years of careful anonymity. Jody, however, was thrilled. "He can't sue all 5 of us, Cora," she told me over the phone. "And the district attorney's office is already on the move. Your evidence was the linchpin they needed to open a formal criminal investigation." The weeks that followed were consumed by preparations for the legal battle. I met with attorneys from the DA's office, giving detailed accounts of the day Victor took me, the years of foster care, and the confrontation at the gallery. Every detail I had locked away, every bit of my trauma, had to be exposed, labeled, and used as evidence. It was exhausting, peeling back the layers of scar tissue I had built up since childhood. "You need to prepare, Cora," the prosecutor, a serious woman named Ms. Davies, warned me. "Victor Duncan will paint you as unstable, unreliable, and motivated by revenge. We have the proof. But the jury needs to believe you." I nodded, feeling the anxiety tighten its grip. It was one thing to confront Victor alone, fueled by adrenaline. It was another entirely to sit in a courtroom, under oath, and face his expensive defense team. The fear was real. A cold knot in my stomach that tasted like old copper. Then, just as the grand jury was set to formally indict Victor, Davies called me in for another meeting. Her tone was unusually grave. "Cora, we need to discuss a second, related discovery," she said, ushering me into a small, windowless conference room. While investigating Duncan's time as a social worker, specifically to establish the timeline of the art acquisition, we subpoenaed sealed state records related to your removal case. My heart lurched. I gripped the edge of the conference table. My removal case. The file I never wanted to see again. "What kind of documentation?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Reports, court filings, and records of your mother's attempts to regain custody." Ms. Davies paused, her expression one of deep sympathy. She tried, "Cora, your mother fought for you." I stared at her, utterly stunned. "She did. Why didn't she get me back?" "For 4 years. Ms. Davies continued gently. "She filed petitions, attended hearings, completed parenting classes. Everything the court asked. But the case worker, Victor Duncan, repeatedly filed reports claiming she was unfit. Reports that she'd missed appointments, failed drug tests, and showed no stable improvement. But we found inconsistencies, Cora. Dates that don't match up. Test results that, according to the labs, were never actually conducted. We believe he fabricated reports to keep you in the system." The air left my lungs in a sharp gasp. I felt dizzy, physically sick. The theft of the painting was a financial crime. This was a soul-murdering crime. He lied. I choked out. He kept me away from her. "It appears so," Ms. Davies confirmed, "and we have a theory as to why. We're investigating potential kickbacks from foster families he placed children with. And, of course, the access he gained to children's belongings, like your art, became a lucrative byproduct of his position." My entire world tilted. The profound sense of abandonment that had defined my life, the certainty that my mother didn't want me, was a lie manufactured by the man who was now facing charges for art theft. He didn't just steal the painting, he stole my mother. He stole my family, and he stole my history. That invisible man didn't just take a souvenir, he took my only chance at happiness. The betrayal was complete, total, and horrifying. The confrontation was about to become far more personal, far more devastating. 2 months after the grand jury indictment, I met with Ms. Davies, the prosecutor, again to review the evidence. I sat across the table from Ms. Davies, the prosecutor, trying to absorb the sheer enormity of the betrayal. He hadn't just stolen an object, he had fabricated a reality. He had created the narrative of my mother's incompetence, ensuring my lifelong belief that I had been abandoned. We believe he essentially ran a small, private adoption brokerage on the side, Ms. Davies explained, her voice low. Placing children in foster homes that paid a premium for quick placement, and using his position to sabotage any attempts by the biological parent to regain custody. The artwork was just a convenient, lucrative bonus. I felt nauseous. The cold calculation of it was worse than any physical attack. My mother was poor, yes, but she was not unfit. She was just a casualty in Victor Duncan's quiet, profitable system of child exploitation. What happened to her? I finally managed to ask, the question burning my throat. My mother, Angela Perry. If she fought for me, if she did everything right, where is she now? Ms. Davies looked down at the file, then met my eyes with genuine sorrow. Cora, your mother passed away in 2007. Pneumonia. According to the medical records we found, she was hospitalized, but didn't seek treatment in time. She had been suffering from severe depression in the years following your removal. My entire world tilted and crashed. 2007. I was 10 years old. I remember that year, still bouncing between foster homes and writing pathetic, hopeful letters to her that were always returned undelivered. She had died fighting for me. She had died brokenhearted. I couldn't speak. The conference room, the file, the city outside, everything faded into a hollow, echoing silence. The man I was fighting wasn't just a thief. He was a murderer of hope. Miss Davies gave me a moment, pushing a glass of water toward me. There's more, Cora. Before she passed, she wrote endless letters to the court, begging to see you. She also kept every single drawing you'd ever made before you were removed. Not just the one Victor stole, dozens. When she died, her belongings went to the state. We found the box in evidence storage. It's yours? After this is over. I was openly crying now, silent, stinging tears that felt like they were ripping through old emotional scar tissue. She never stopped fighting for me. The invisible man had ensured that the only love I ever knew was locked away, and that I carried the trauma of being unwanted for 2 decades. I thought you should know. Ms. Davies finished gently. She was a good mother. She never gave up. The devastating revelation transformed the upcoming trial from a legal battle over art into a personal reckoning over a destroyed life. My feelings of abandonment were finally laid to rest, replaced by a pure, unadulterated resolve to seek justice for my mother. The trial began 2 months later. Victor Duncan was charged with 15 counts of theft, fraud, and exploitation of minors. The media coverage was a frenzy. I testified. So did Gary, and the 3 other adults Jody had located. We told our stories, one by one, painting a picture of calculated, systemic betrayal. I told the court about the watercolor, the social worker's smile, and the secret inscription on the back. Gary talked about his dog painting, the last tangible link to his past family. The prosecutor, Ms. Davies, presented the evidence: the stolen paintings, the fraudulent sales records, and the newly exposed bombshell. Victor's forged documents, used to justify keeping children in the system. Documents that led directly to my mother's despair and death. Victor's lawyers argued that the art was abandoned property, that their client had preserved for posterity, and they attacked my credibility, trying to paint me as emotionally unstable and motivated by greed. But the jury had heard enough. After 4 days of deliberation, The verdict came back. The foreman read the results, each word a hammer blow against Victor's carefully constructed life. Guilty. Guilty on all 15 counts. The sentencing was delivered a week later. 8 years in prison, full restitution to all victims, and the forfeiture of all stolen works. The judge looked directly at Victor, who stood rigid, his face pale and slack with shock. "Mr. Duncan, you were entrusted with the care of vulnerable children, the state's most profound responsibility. You exploited them for profit. There is no excuse for what you have done." Victor was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look at me. I watched him go, and for a moment, I expected triumph. Instead, I felt only emptiness. The rage was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sorrow for the life that was stolen. The true climax wasn't Victor's conviction. It was the revelation of my mother's sacrificial love. That was the victory I would carry forward. Now, the long, hard work of healing could begin. 3 months after the verdict, the district attorney's office called me. They had finished processing the evidence, and had 2 items to return: my painting, and my mother's box of belongings. I sat on the floor of my apartment, the box resting on my lap. It was a simple cardboard container, labeled with my mother's name and the date of her death. This box held the last vestiges of the woman Victor Duncan had lied about, the woman who had died believing she was a failure. I opened it slowly. Inside, dozens of pieces of paper were stacked neatly. Drawings, crayon, marker, pencil, all from when I was 5 and 6 years old. Crude pictures of stick, figure families, colorful houses, and bright, impossible suns. My mother had kept every one. I touched a picture of a smiling face, surrounded by hearts, and felt a painful, overwhelming surge of love. At the bottom of the box were letters. Letters written on cheap, thin stationery. Addressed to the Family Court of New York. I picked up one and unfolded it. Her handwriting was careful, slightly shaky. "Please let me see my daughter. I am doing everything you asked. I got a better job. I have stable housing. I completed the classes. Please. She is my whole world. I miss Cora every day. I think about her constantly. Is she okay? Is she happy? Please tell her I love her. Please tell her I am trying." I read every letter, each one a testament to her devotion and her devastating loneliness. They were dated across 4 years, ending just before her passing. The last one was dated 2 weeks before 2007. The writing was faint, frail. "I don't think I am going to make it. I am too tired. But please, someone tell Cora I loved her. Tell her I never stopped fighting. Tell her I am sorry I couldn't bring her home." I held the letter to my chest and sobbed. Not from the rage of betrayal, but from the immense, shattering relief of knowing the truth. The burden of being the unwanted child, the feeling of invisibility, finally lifted. She had loved me. She had fought for me until her last, weary breath. Jody Coleman helped me find my mother's grave. It was in a small, quiet cemetery, marked by a modest headstone. Angela Perry, 1975 to 2007. Beloved mother. I knelt down on the damp grass, placing my watercolor painting. The blue and yellow swirls, the 2 crude figures, against the headstone. The painting I had made for her. The last thing I had given her before Victor took me away. "Hi, Mama," I whispered, the word thick with unshed grief. "I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. I didn't know. I didn't know you tried." The wind rustled through the tall cemetery trees. I got the painting back, I told her, touching the fading green ang in the corner. The one I made for you. I wanted you to have it, like I promised, always together. I traced her name on the stone. I knew now that the love I felt as a 6-year-old hadn't been misplaced or foolish. It was real. I know you loved me, I whispered. I know you did everything you could. And I love you, too. I just wish I could have told you. I stayed there for a long time, sitting with her. With the painting, finally feeling connected to the person I had been before the system broke me. 6 months later, the stolen artworks were returned to their creators. Gary got his dog painting back. When he held it, he cried quietly, openly. He kept it, too. Others sold theirs, needing the money and the fresh start. I kept mine. I hung the watercolor in my apartment where I could see it every day. It was a reminder of my mother, of her love, and of the fight she fought, and the fight I won. Victor's restitution from the sale of his assets was divided among the victims. My share amounted to $80,000, enough to change everything. I used it not for luxury, but for purpose. I enrolled in an art therapy program. I wanted to work with foster kids, to teach them that their creativity had value, that their voices deserved to be heard, and that art could be a powerful tool for processing trauma. I wanted to be the safe adult that Victor Duncan never was. 3 years ago, I walked into a gallery to serve champagne. I was invisible, disposable, and wounded. I saw a painting, my painting, being sold for $150,000. I could have stayed silent. I could have stayed safe. But I didn't. I stood up to the man who thought he owned my history and destroyed his empire. And in doing so, I found my mother again. Not in person, but in her letters, in the enduring love she left behind, and in the strength I finally found to fight, and that, after 22 years, was enough. It had to be.